You've been saving, optimizing, and doing all the right things, but what if putting life off until retirement means missing the very moments you've been working so hard for? Instead of grinding until you're 65 or 70, imagine taking a mini retirement every few years. Time off not just to relax, but to invest in your health, your family, your dreams, and the version of yourself you rarely have time to prioritize. And here's the twist. It might actually accelerate your career, unlock new opportunities, and grow your wealth in the long run. As my guest Jillian puts it,
by having those consistent breaks, a mini retirement can be almost like a capital investment into your personal life.
And it's way more feasible than you might think, even without a high income. So today we'll break down exactly how to make a mini retirement a reality, how to fund it, how to talk to your employer or structure it around your business, and how, if done right, it can even pay for itself over time. I'm Chris Hutchins. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or leave a comment or review. And if you want to keep upgrading your life, money, and travel, click follow or subscribe. Jillian, why is the idea of one big retirement at the end of your life a flawed model?
I mean, it's probably not the worst, but it's definitely not the most optimal. And there's a lot of benefits to taking little retirements. But I would say the one that probably resonates the most is the fact that there are seasons in life with expiration dates. So if your plan is to work super hard for 40 years and never take a break, with the idea of when I get to 65, I'll do all those things that I never did. I can delay my life until then. You might realize that there's certain seasons of life that passed you by. Your kids aren't 5 and 7 anymore. They can't do this massive road trip with you. Your parents aren't still healthy enough to hike through Ireland with you. Maybe your health isn't what it was. Maybe your preferences changed. And backpacking through Europe and sleeping in hostels, you're like, I don't know if that's my jam anymore. But if you are hoping that you can just delay all these amazing things till the end, some things will wait, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that won't.
I just had this conversation with a friend yesterday where he and I both have 2 daughters and they're both in that like 3 to 7 year range. And we were like, in 10 years, our daughters might not want to hang out with us. But right now, they think we're the coolest people in the world. And we were just brainstorming what we should do because of that. Like, it was just timely because I mentioned that we were talking today. It's like, how do we take advantage of the fact? It doesn't have to be today. But like, we've got an expiring window where our children think we're awesome and want to hang out with us. And when I was in high school, I wasn't like, ooh, I want to just go spend every waking moment with my parents. But my kids do right now.
Yeah, things change. And I think there's some that we know will change. We can anticipate this might be different. But then honestly, there's things in life that you didn't know it had an expiration date. You know, your spouse gets MS and you were like, I didn't know that like hiking Machu Picchu had an expiration date that was coming up in 5 years. Someone passes away. And so I think by being intentional of like, what if we just took a little break? Every 3 years, every 5 years, we took a month off or 6 months off and we leaned into the things that might pass us by if we try to wait on it.
So we're going to get into how do you do this? Why is it not just for the super wealthy? Like why this could be for anyone in different ways and shapes. But first, I just want to understand, how would you define a mini retirement?
So for me, a mini retirement has 3 elements. The first one is a month or longer. I feel like a month is kind of the minimum effective dose. The second one is stepping away from your primary career, stepping away from your 9 to 5. So for a lot of people, it does look like a big adventure or travel or hobbies or family. But for some people, it can be a professional pivot or starting a side hustle or just doing something really different, volunteering. The third one is to focus on something that matters to you, something that's meaningful.
And can you partially step away? I'm just thinking out loud, like, oh, what if we decided to make the podcast every other week for 3 months next summer? Would that count? Because I'm still working, but not really as much.
So everyone can just, use whatever term they want that fits their prerogative. I do for self-employed people. In the book, I have a whole chapter just for self-employed because it's a whole different bear. But I do encourage people for your first one, maybe start with 10% of the work you normally do. Because going to 0% is actually, for most self-employed people, more stressful than doing 10%. So if you normally work 50 hours, like just dedicate an hour a day, 5 days a week to make sure nothing's burned down, to do the most critical tasks. Because for a lot of self-employed people, that little check-in actually allows them to pivot, to go out and have fun for the day and to relax and be more fully present in their time off.
And what kind of impact broadly do you think taking multiple retirements throughout your life has on your time, your money, your energy? How does it affect those things?
I try to make a case in the book. I think for a lot of people, the personal life one makes sense. Yeah, I can focus on my health. I can focus on my relationships. I can develop hobbies. Like I can take care of myself. That is intuitive. What's a little counterintuitive is it can have a massive positive impact on your financial trajectory and on your career trajectory. So if you're a little bit strategic of how you time these, of how you use your mini retirements, all three of those areas of your life can be massively improved by taking consistent mini retirements.
So I think the biggest objection that's coming to my head, and we could talk about others, is like, okay, well, you want me to stop having income, and I haven't yet saved up enough money to stop working. And now what I just heard you say is, well, actually, you might have more money by not working. I was going to talk about this later, but like, let's just jump right into that now. How is that possible?
So there's a couple of factors at play. One big one for a lot of people, your largest raise and your biggest promotion comes when you switch companies. It's not with your current employer. So if you're 25, 30, 35 and kind of mapping out your career, if you were like, what if every 5 years I decided to switch companies? I take a month off, I take 3 months off in between, and then I find my next job. That might massively increase your lifetime earning potential, because with each of those bumps up, it carries forward for decades. A good example of this, I had a friend who took a mini retirement, took a year off. He came back to a 50% increase at his next job, which you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That sounds so cool. It was because he had worked at his previous employer for 15 years, which meant for a lot of years, he was being undercompensated. He was not at market value. His market value was 150% clearly. And so I'm kind of a numbers geek. So if let's say for 8 of those years, he was undercompensated, well, that's $400,000. Let's say his year off cost him $100,000. He would still be $300,000 ahead if he would have taken consistent mini retirements. So by the time he was 65, I don't know, $1 million, $2 million ahead. Like he left so much money on the table by being quote unquote loyal to his employer.
Now, to take the contrarian take, if every 5 years he had switched jobs and never taken a mini retirement, he would probably be even more ahead, financially speaking only, right?
Well, I think personal life, by having those consistent breaks, a mini retirement can be almost like a capital investment into your personal life. I took a mini retirement in my late 20s. I took a month off and I did intensive inpatient therapy, like 6 hours of therapy a day. It was like a full house renovation. Now, I've done a live-in renovation where like you do it real slowly in the middle of your regular life, and it's so painful. But if you can just like renovate a house in a month and then you're going to move back into like a fully finished house, much more preferable. And it was something that was an investment of time and energy and money. But every year since, I've been able to build on those renovations that I did then. It's benefited me in an ongoing way.
I believe it. Like, I think that I would be so much more professionally motivated and productive if I took a month off and just got all that punch list that's going on in my head of like all the things I need to do. But then I come back to your definition and I think, oh, wait, I need to focus on things that matter to me. I imagine if I took a month off and I was like, I'm going to use this time to focus on things that matter. But first, I just got to get all this stuff done that I haven't been doing in the house, right? Like we want to clean up the storage room. We want to move the beds around. Like, is it possible that people do this and that punch list of stuff takes up their entire mini retirement? And how does that like mental overhead, home project, life project stuff fit into a mini retirement?
One of two ways. It can take up your whole time. And if that's your goal and your intention, and that's what's meaningful, like I feel like I'm drowning and I would rather not feel like I'm drowning every single day. I think that's a worthy goal. So a lot of people do get caught up on projects, on life. I'm guilty of like, sometimes I have over 100 tabs open on my phone. And then it stops counting. It's just like a little smiley face. Sometimes you have too many tabs open, and closing all those loops out does improve your quality of life going forward. For some people, it is finishing up a specific project. During one of my mini retirements, I decluttered and I went through the entire house. I touched every single item and got rid of 50% of our stuff. I had 5 little kids at the time, like massive benefit moving forward to not feel like I was living in a storage unit. So it can be really meaningful. But on the other side, I encourage people to pick maybe 2 or 3 intentions for their time off. Don't do all of them at the same time, but create kind of phases. And for a lot of people, that first phase is kind of a get caught up on life, recover from burnout, do some rest, just feel more at their baseline. And that can be a great way to start a mini retirement, especially the first 2 or 3 weeks.
In the book, you outline these 4 steps. And so I'm going to drill on part of the first one, which is like, there's some filters for setting goals. How do you think about that goal setting for mini retirements? And maybe before that, what are some common types beyond the let's declutter or let's travel, which I assume are pretty common?
Yeah. Extended travel, slow travel, super popular. It's stuff that can't fit into nights and weekends. Like you're not going to hike the Camino on a 4-day weekend. Or whether you just feel like realistically it's not going to happen. Should it be able to happen? Cool. Yeah, maybe. About when I turned 40, I realized, I have to take care of my 40-year-old body different than my 23-year-old body. It has like different requirements now. It needs vegetables, I think. I don't know. I can't eat candy for breakfast. I was like, I need to figure this out. And it can be easy to be like, yes, while raising 5 kids and while running a business and while doing all these other things and all these other responsibilities, I should also learn an entire different way of feeding myself and moving my body. But I just couldn't. So taking some time off and being like, I'm going to do a deep dive. I'm going to reset all my habits. I'm going to reimagine how I care for myself was a really important investment into my future health. Like we talked about things that have an expiration date. For a lot of people, that looks like recovering from burnout. Hard to do sometimes at nights and weekends. Time with people we love, hobbies, personal growth. Those dreams that we kind of gave up on because we thought, well, that's not going to be part of my life or that's not realistic. A mini retirement's a great opportunity to loop back around to that. I always thought I would do social dancing and then I just never did. So last year I took a month off to learn tango and it was amazing. I had so much fun. But sometimes, you thought like I wanted to be in a band. You can start a band and play for a month in your garage. You can do a long hike. You can loop back around to those dreams that maybe you thought didn't fit into your life, and you can give them a go.
This episode is brought to you by Stable, which is a company that has really made my life better this year. And that's because Stable provides you or your business with a mailing address you can send everything to, and they scan the mail, forward packages, deposit checks, and more. It's really a full dashboard to manage all your physical mail online, and thousands of companies from Formation all the way to Fortune 500 use Stable to automate their mailroom and act as their permanent business address with the IRS, state, and any vendor. I also love it because you all know I care a lot about privacy, so I actually prefer not to share my personal info with every app or service that asks for a mailing address, so Stable has been incredible for that. Stable is so easy to use for you or your team, and it'll let you manage your mail from anywhere with a digital mailbox, and best of all, you can get 50% off your first 12 months at chrishutchins.com/stable. That's 50% off your new digital mailbox at chrishutchins.com/stable or the link in the description. For people that hear this and they've got 5-6 ideas, they're like, well, I'd love to take a month to prioritize my health. I would love to take a month to spend time with my family, declutter the house. Obviously, you advocate taking lots of these throughout your life, but how should someone think about which one they should start with?
Yeah, there are a couple ways I think about it. Starting with kind of what feels urgent and what feels important. Is there something that you're like, gosh, this has to be first? Like, I'm so burned out. I feel crispy. Yes, I want to maybe start a side hustle. Yes, I want to travel in Europe, but I feel so exhausted at the moment. I can't even muster the enthusiasm for those things. So if something feels really urgent, or, it was like my mom got cancer and she feels great now, but we don't know what it's going to look like in 12 months. Like, let's front load those things that feel urgent. But there's a couple other ways to look at it. One, let's say you have a bucket list of 20 different things and you're kind of early in your financial journey, you can front load the things that are more affordable. all 20 of those things might have a different price tag. And it actually makes a big impact in your financial trajectory. I did a 10-week road trip to 10 national parks with my little kiddos in a pop-up camper. Super affordable trip. I do want to do an around the world cruise with a bunch of friends. That one can wait. And that's the other thing. Like, front load the ones that maybe you need to be the most capable and the most healthy to do. Do them early. I've seen a lot of 70-year-olds on cruises. Like, they seem to be having a great time. If you want to hike the Appalachian Trail, like, maybe let's try that in like your 30s or 40s. Maybe you can do it at 80. Like, that'll be awesome. But you start to kind of roll the dice. So front load the things that you really want to do in this season, the things with expiration dates, the things that are more affordable. And if you know things have a high probability or a long shelf life, maybe push those a little bit further down.
I love that. Are there things people should do to kind of design like a really impactful mini retirement, whether it's how they spend their days or just things that they should be thinking of in advance once they have their big goal in mind?
Absolutely. This is something that you don't want to wing. A mini retirement is such a big investment of time and energy and money, but there can be this temptation to be like, you know what? All I need is to not be working and I will be peak happiness. And the reality is happiness can be one part reducing suffering and then one part adding joy. So we need to kind of focus on both sides. I really encourage people to kind of come up with a schedule. What is their ideal day? What is their ideal week? How could they structure that day and week to really optimize for whatever the goal is in that phase? And then do a weekly check-in and like, how is it going? Am I actually on track? Am I doing the things I said I would do? Am I doing the things I wanted to do? Do I need to pivot anything before next week? Because your time can definitely get away from you. It can go really fast.
So I'm already starting to think about this. We actually talked about how next summer, maybe we want to take a month off. So it's like, okay, how do we want to spend our days? Kids are out of school. I've got that figured out. But I keep coming back to the other objections that either I or other people might have. And I feel like the biggest one is no income coming in, spending more money. When you think about the financial side of this, how do you think people should start to approach this so it doesn't feel so daunting?
Yeah. So if your time off is going to be unpaid, maybe your employer will pay it, but maybe they won't. Maybe with your business, it will create income. But worst case scenario is if it's going to be unpaid, you have to cover all of that. And then you have the additional budget for whatever your kind of activity is. And I encourage people to try to keep it within 50% of their monthly take-home pay. So if you bring home, let's say $5,000 a month, maybe spend an additional $2,500 on your mini retirement, which is also one of the reasons that mini retirements are actually accessible for people at all sorts of income levels, because the cost is very proportional to how much you make.
Now, in the case of an unpaid time off, right? You've stepped away from your job. No one's going to pay you. Then you'd probably have to not save $3,000, but $9,000, right?
Well, it depends how long. So you have your monthly salary plus up to 50% of whatever that take-home pay is. So per month.
Oh yeah, I guess I was assuming 3 months, but if it was just 1 month, then yes, yeah, it wouldn't be that much.
Yeah, that amount times however many months you want to be gone.
Yeah, and I'll keep people thinking about, you're saying take home pay. And I think it's really important because I know a lot of people do the math about how much they make and how much they spend. And they often use their kind of like gross salary number. And they think, oh, I make $120,000 a year. I make $10,000 a month. I need to replace that. And it's like, well, no, if you're not making money, you're not paying taxes on that money either. It's the after tax amount. It's the take home amount, not necessarily, the full amount that you are getting paid.
Yeah. And if we're just talking a month or 3 months, pausing, your retirement contributions or other savings of your take-home pay, you're saving 20% of that. Pausing it for a month probably isn't going to have a huge long-term impact if that kind of makes the whole thing feel more comfortable.
I didn't even realize in preparing for all this, I want to take a mini retirement. I didn't realize I'd actually, done one. There was a time many years ago where my wife and I ended up subletting our place and we backpacked around the world for 7.5 months. So I totally have taken a mini retirement. Didn't even realize it at the time. Maybe financially responsible, maybe not. We just burned through our savings, but we had the savings, so we didn't go into debt. We thought about, okay, we want to go on a trip. We want to see places. We'd put this map on the wall and we were like, where are all the places we want to see in the world? And there were so many. We thought, how are we ever going to see them all if we don't go for, an extended period of time where travel is actually cheaper? Like, it's really cheap to go from one country in Africa to another. It's really expensive to go from the United States to Africa. And so we took this trip and we thought, well, we could go anywhere in the world, but let's go to the places where there's the biggest discrepancy between the cost to rough it and the cost to not rough it. Like in Europe, there is every step along the way, but in a lot of Africa, there is not. Right. There's like really beautiful safari lodges and there's places where you can camp, for free. And sure, there's some hotels in between, but it didn't feel as easily accessible to transport around. So we did this big, long overland trip and we couch surfed and hosteled and camped. And looking back, my wife and I joke, we were like, that was so awesome. Maybe her a little more than me, like never going to do something like that again. I always joke about taking our daughters later. I'm like, I'll take them to hostels and all this stuff. My wife's like, that season's over. That doesn't need to be a thing I do. I like cleaner bed. We were bringing those sleep sheets because the beds were gross, like all kinds of stuff. So for us, that was really important, was like, think about the things that we're capable of doing, but think about the way we're able to do them. We spent $7,500 each for 7.5 months. To do that trip with 2 kids in like a much more comfortable place isn't a little bit more. It would be wildly and more expensive. So I hadn't really thought about the fact that I did take one of these, but when we did, we were very intentional about like, if we're going to rough it and if we're going to be cheap, what places can we see that would be way harder to see if we wanted to do it differently? When I think about these breaks, like we were lucky in that I was doing some freelance work. I'm curious for people who have a job. Maybe they like their job. You could quit your job and hope that in the future you find a new job that you're making more money. As you said, that's often a way to increase your salary. But if we step back a little, is that the only option, or are there other ways that you can approach your employer to make this easier?
If you like your job, if you want to stay there, I would 100% try your hand at negotiating a mini retirement. I've worked one-on-one with so many people and everyone's like, yeah, it's not really a thing in my company. Like, we don't really have that policy. Nobody does it. But with a little bit of planning, usually people have a much better outcome than they even had hoped for, especially if it's 1 to 3 months. Just because logistically the HR backend of leave, most companies have some sort of HR system for people to be gone for up to 12 weeks, whether it's FMLA or maternity leave or whatever. If you want a longer leave of absence, it does get a little bit trickier. Usually what'll end up happening is you officially separate from the company with an open invitation. Like, as soon as you're done with your trip, please come back. Please reapply. Like, we will find a spot for you, is probably the 2 ways that can go.
But within that 1 to 3 month period, have you found people who were convinced that their company would say no and managed to make this happen? And what were the things you coached them through?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say most people don't think it can happen. And at least in the cases I've seen, and I've talked to a couple hundred people about their mini retirements, overwhelmingly, it's successful. So there's a couple things that you can do to prepare. When you read the book, you'll see, like, I've heard every objection. I've heard every fear. I've heard every point of confusion. And so I write it in a way of like, it's not fluffy. It's not aspirational. It's like, here's exactly what you need to do. Here's every step. One of the first things is to come up with your mini retirement story. Like, you create the narrative. Don't let other people kind of backfill this with their assumptions. You really need to get ahead of it. And I encourage people to think about kind of 4 elements of this story. The first one is it needs to be positive. Even if there's like a negative reason, like you're really burned out. You do not want to go in and say, I am so tired of all you. I cannot look at your faces for a minute longer. I just need to be home. We're not going to frame it that way. So frame it in a positive way. The second one is that it should be something that's interesting. Like, do something that's interesting during your time off. The third, which sometimes people don't think about, is the more specific you can make it. So instead of saying, I just want more time with my kids, like I mentioned, I did a 10-week road trip to 10 national parks, a very specific way we spent time together. And then the fourth one, frame it as a one-time event. 10-week trip to 10 national parks, that's not really a thing that people do every single year. It kind of sounds like a one-time thing. Going to hike Mount Kilimanjaro for your honeymoon, it kind of feels like a one-time thing. training to do, a triathlon in Hawaii for your 50th birthday. That kind of feels like a one-time thing. And when you put these 4 elements together and you realize like you're sitting in front of another human being who has similar hopes and dreams and values. So for an example, to put all 4 together, if you said, hey, so I have a week of leave and I was hoping we could talk about how I could maybe get an extra 3 weeks unpaid off. You see, my parents, they've always had this dream of biking through France when they retire. But a couple of years ago, my dad passed away, and this year my mom's turning 60 and she's set to retire. I would love to be able to do this 1-month cycling trip with her. I feel like it would be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And while she's healthy, while she's able to do this, I would love to be able to have this experience. I've thought through some of the logistics. I know there'll be a couple challenges, but I have a couple solutions that if I think we can make this work. And if you need to be a little bit more heavy-handed, you can sprinkle in at the end. I've loved working here so much, and I'm really excited about the future projects we have and the team. I feel like we're really starting to gel. I would really hate to have to separate. I would love to find a way if we can make this work.
And one thing you didn't mention in that narrative, which I think as someone who's hired people in the past, is like, it is so much more costly and time intensive to hire someone than 1 month. Maybe there are roles where that's not the case, but in most cases I've ever hired anyone, not that I would want to make this a policy necessarily, but a month off, especially if it's unpaid or I have to find a replacement, assuming it's an employee I like, it's a no-brainer. Like as the employer, is there any way that you found that frames that up politely where it's like, hey, isn't it going to be so much easier to give me a month off than to go hire someone?
So I really encourage people, don't drop this in your employer's lap. Don't be like, hey, here's a huge problem you have to solve. Not that you're not busy or anything. Think through the logistics, think through the process, think through the challenges, bring solutions. It needs to be a really creative and collaborative approach. But ultimately, you want the accommodating to be easier, cheaper, and quicker than replacing you. And it's up to you to build this case. Like, this is the easiest solution for everyone. This is the cheapest solution for everyone. Like, it's going to be the quickest solution. Everyone has a reason that, like, they're pretty sure they can't get a mini retirement. If they don't earn a lot of money, they're like, I'm too poor. On the other side of the spectrum, they maybe earn a lot of money and they're like, yeah, I got a couple $1,000s. I can swing that. They're too important to leave. They're too critical. They're too necessary. Everything would burn down without them. Nobody can fill in for them. I was talking to a CFO at a retreat, and he's like, God, I would love a month off. I think it would be so good for me. There's no way. Nobody does what I do. They can't replace me. It's essential that I'm there. And I was like, okay, cool. So if you left, how long would it take to hire someone to fill your spot? Oh yeah, that's tough. Like that probably takes 6 months. It's like a long process. I'm like, okay. And then like, how long would it take for that person to like really get onboarded to where maybe they're being as effective and efficient as you? And he's like, yeah, it's a long process. That's probably another 6 months. And I'm like, So they could either give you a month off, or they could take a year of your spot not being fully filled. Which one would be easier for them? Like, which one's quicker and simpler and cheaper? Because they love you. They know you do a good job. This new hypothetical person is a gamble. Thinking about it more that way instead of like, I'm too important to leave for a month.
And so that gets over your personal objection, but is there a good way to frame that to your boss where it doesn't come across too threatening? Like, hey, if you say no, it's going to cost you so much time and money to replace me. And now it's kind of like, you're not collaborating. You're not trying to solve this thing together.
I tend to be kind of a subtle, soft sell. And I think you can be really subtle. Like, I know we're in the middle of this project. We're going to finish it up next year. Like, I would really hate to leave before we wrap this up. I feel like this would be a real tough thing for someone to come in and fill this. Or I've been here 4 years. I feel like I'm really starting to kind of click in this role. And I know how long it took to onboard me. I would hate for the team to be set back for so long because it just takes so long to train someone for this position. I think there's some really subtle ways, but they know.
Yeah. You're just telling them the thing they know, but
you can hint at it, but they're like, yeah, no, we're doing that mental math. And HR especially knows.
Yeah. You mentioned that sometimes it doesn't have to be unpaid, but should people go into this with the expectation that they're not going to get free vacation from their employer, or what have you seen?
So I would say it depends on what they give paid leave for. So if you have a lot of paid leave for FMLA things, for maternity leave, like if they're pretty generous with paid leave, if they have any sort of sabbatical program already that involves some sort of pay, then you can maybe start with like, that would be cool, but not necessary. If your company offers like no paid leave, you're probably not getting paid leave. So kind of looking at the company culture. So there are some things that you can negotiate in this when you're looking at especially accommodations that you're willing to make. So there are a couple things that are problems they can't figure out. They can't solve without you there. Maybe it's an end of the month report. Maybe it's a meeting with a certain client. That's the thing in their mind. They're like, yeah, but how do we figure this piece out? So coming up with accommodations that don't cost you or your experience very much, but are like a high ROI for them. And you can kind of bring this negotiation of like, man, I know this client, we have a meeting every Friday. It's super important. I know I've been the point person on this. I would be willing to come in or to do a video conference in 2 hours every Friday just to meet this need. And then the magic words are, in return, I would appreciate maybe you paying 10% of my salary to cover all of my healthcare deductions. And so you can come up with a list of things that you're willing to make this accommodation and you would appreciate if they could make this other accommodation.
And you mentioned sabbatical. Why is this not a sabbatical? Could you just take a sabbatical or how is a mini retirement different than a sabbatical?
I think people can use whatever noun, whatever language really resonates with them. So I think there's some slight connotations with other words. Usually a sabbatical kind of indicates you're coming back to the same employer, not switching careers. A gap year kind of infers that it's a year long. A hiatus, a career break, I think any word that you're like, that one feels right for this thing that I'm doing right now, go with that. I use mini retirement because I feel like it's the most generic and the least loaded with additional meaning.
This episode is brought to you by Built Rewards, which is an amazing points program with so many ways to earn, including on your rent, where you don't even need to check with your landlord. So let me explain. First, there's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Built points toward. Points can be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to chrishutchins.com/built. That's chrishutchins.com/built, B-I-L-T. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you, chrishutchins.com/built, or the link in the description to start earning points on your rent payments today. Obviously, a sabbatical kind of implies you're coming back. And you talked about how one of the best strategies financially is to change careers. For people who, in their mind, they've always been told, always line up your next job before you leave your current job. How do you get over that fear that finding that next job might be a challenge?
So this whole process, I think about fear as a little bit like an Evel Knievel stunt. He used to ride like a dirt bike motorcycle and jump it across a ravine, which seems super dangerous. But he built ramps on both sides. And he kind of did the math and he kind of did the calculations. So the actual risk was much lower than how it appeared. And I feel like that's our job, is how can we build ramps on both sides so that our actual risk is lower than this thing, that we're doing appears to be. So if you're going to be switching careers, there's a couple steps that I really encourage people to take. One of them, a really simple tactical thing is I call it like a goodbye email. And it could be a goodbye Instagram post or whatever, but something along the lines that you send to your coworkers, your clients, people in the industry. I've really loved working here. Loved working with you all for the next 6 months. I'm going to do this amazing adventure, but I look forward to returning to this industry. And if you all happen to hear of anything in the meantime, feel free to reach out. I will be busy with, this backpacking trip through Europe, but I would love to connect in the future. And it creates an open loop in people's minds, and especially in work-based cultures, like an American culture where we kind of idolize work a little bit. We're very work-centric. You not working makes everyone just a little bit uncomfortable. Like you just out there living your life and having fun and posting pictures of these adventures. They're like, oh, and it opens these loops. And I've seen this when people retire early or when they take sabbaticals, all of a sudden they get all these job offers. Like nobody had ever given them job offers, like unsolicited. And all of a sudden you're kind of top of mind and people reach out more. And so you can take that natural tendency and kind of amplify it by networking, by building those contacts, maintaining those contacts while you are gone. One of the really practical things, my ex, when we took a year off, there was a job he was thinking about returning to. And about once a month, every other month, he would just go into the office with a box of donuts and be like, hey, how y'all doing? Like, how are things going here? Like, what's the new gossip? And just chat everyone up. And when he worked there, he had never been offered that promotion. And in the year he was gone, he was offered it 3 times. And I was like, that's interesting.
I love that. So what about finding that job and just asking to start it later?
So that can be a really helpful tool, especially if you don't have like a year-long adventure planned. If a month off, if 2 months off, let's say it's September right now, and you get a new job and you're like, hey, I've got some things I need to wrap up. I've got some personal things to take care of. Like, can I start in November? And they're like, oh, like we really, really need you sooner. And you're like, okay, well, maybe 6 weeks then. And they're like, okay, that sounds good. For a lot of people, that's an easy way to start because you're not stressed about finding the next job. Like you have that security. You can really enjoy your time off without having your attention split of I'm enjoying my time off, but maybe I should be looking or maybe I should be applying for jobs. And I would say for almost everyone, if you can afford, an extra 4 weeks off, why not ask? And for the employer, I think you can really pitch it as they're again creating your own narrative, your own version of the story of I'm really excited about this new opportunity. I've got A, B, and C that I've kind of been postponing. The last job was really busy. I would love to kind of wrap all of this up so that when I start, I'm 100% focused. I'm 100% all in. I don't want to try to balance these other things that I have going with a brand new job. I'd rather just like knock all this stuff out and then be 100% on day one.
Yeah. I love that idea. And I just keep thinking, I want to hit the ground running and this is going to be a distraction. But I'm not sure whether you intended this, but the strategy of setting an anchor point even further. Like if you're like, oh, I really want to take 2 months off before I start, tell them, hey, could I start in 5 months? And they're like, no, that's crazy. And you're like, oh, fine. What about 2? Like it really just comes down to thinking about your narrative and how you tell it.
In all of those negotiations, like having that ideal and then having kind of what you would accept. Sometimes people start with the lowest thing they would accept. And you might as well start with the thing that's ideal, whatever it is you're negotiating. But in this case, 3 months, like start with the ideal. You're perceived as very accommodating. You're perceived as very reasonable. If you start with like your lowest bid, and you get it, you don't get any of those bonus points.
You mentioned there's a whole chapter about self-employment, maybe a couple extra tips, especially because it's relevant to me and I'm thinking about this. It's been over a decade since my last mini retirement. What advice do you have for those who are self-employed?
So to start off, it's super scary and it's such a pain in the butt. It requires a lot more preparation is the other thing, where if you're a 9-to-5 employee, it might take a month, 3 months to get ready for you to take this. If you're self-employed, it might take 3 months. It might take a year and a half to really get your business ready. And no, it's a huge hassle up front, but there's a massive benefit on the end when you return. All of these things are important, but they don't become urgent until you step away from your business. And so it kind of gives you a deadline and a little bit of a carrot at the end of the stick to do this. So I have four steps. All of them logistically are annoying. And some of them, for some people, are psychologically challenging. So sometimes we're kind of our own worst enemy on this. But the first one is to simplify things. There is complexity in our work that doesn't need to be there, but we've been able to tolerate it. So we just keep going because it feels too difficult to simplify. So being real honest and simplifying everything you can simplify. And then the second one is to start doing some automation. There's stuff that is just easier for us to do by hand. It takes 20 minutes a week. Or to create the automation or to create the system might take 3 hours. So we just kind of do it the long way over and over and over because we're like, oh, we have the time, we have the bandwidth, we know what we're doing. So putting in place that automation. But then the third one, and people psychologically really hate this, is documentation. One, it's super tedious to be like, how actually do we do this? But there is a psychological component that I bring this magic. I have like this expertise. Everything's unique. Nobody could replicate this. There is no formula because I just bring my creativity to everything. And I'm like, oh, there's probably a little bit of a formula. So like I had one client who does like tech sales, and he was like, well, no, every sales email I respond to is entirely unique to what that request was. And I was like, yeah, but is it? Like, I bet you probably like acknowledge what they said, and you probably offer a solution to that problem, and you probably talk about scope of work, and then you probably offer solutions to other problems they might have, and then you probably set up a time to have a phone call and discuss this more. And he was like, oh, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what it is. So creating some documentation, because then the fourth step is you can delegate things. If you've ever hired an assistant and not done those first 3 steps and just hoped that your assistant could magically do all the first 3 for you, and it was a total hot mess, that's why. But what happens then is you come back to this business that is so much more organized, that's so much cleaner, that's so much more efficient. Everyone's better prepared to help, and there's less on your plate. So one of 2 things happen. Let's say you were working 40 hours a week. You come back and you're like, shoot, I could probably do some 30 hours a week now. And either people go, man, I really want to start doing yoga classes, and my kid wants to do volleyball. Like maybe I'll like help with volleyball, and you kind of invest more in your personal life. Or you go, there's this other project that I really wanted to do, or there's this way I wanted to expand, or there was these ideas that I had, but I never had the time. I never had the bandwidth. And people can kind of really expand their business and grow their business exponentially because they took mini retirements.
I don't know if this was because of the mini retirement or not, but I have a friend who got really good at this. And now I called him the other day and he's like, well, now I'm running 4 companies because he figured out the delegation, the automation. So I'll just say take some baby steps, because he went from 1 to 0 to 1. And then within weeks, he was like starting 2 and 3 and 4. And now I think he wishes he took it a little slower. But you were right. Like when you learn how to set up these processes and automations and hire people and delegate, you can really extract yourself from the business and do lots more. But sometimes I think if any one of those businesses at the same time, there were big problems that he had to jump in, it would be a little bit of a disaster.
Yeah. And the thing is, you come back refreshed and rested and excited and creative, which can lead to, I'm going to do all the things. And you might not feel that rested forever. So yeah, I think starting small.
Now, I want to jump in for a couple minutes into the whole finances stuff. We talked about it a little bit, but are there a few important things that we haven't touched on that people should be thinking about, either when it comes to planning or saving or actually spending during their mini retirements?
So in the planning, there again, think about where you are in your financial journey. You can do more affordable things first, and you can do it in a more affordable way. So if you're like, man, money's kind of tight, definitely can't spend $30,000 on this. There's so many things that you can do if you are thoughtful about it. Like we used to travel all winter, and we would rent out our house while we were gone. And that was $2,500 a month. And that pretty much covered, because we traveled in a camper, all of our camping fees and all of our gas. And I realized, it costs us the same amount of money to live, whether we're living in our house or whether we're traveling full time. If you're like, this really needs to be a budget trip, rent out your place and then go be like a trusted house sitter. Go volunteer on a farm in Italy. Like there's a lot of ways that you could travel really affordably. It might actually be cheaper for you to travel than to be home. And so it's okay to start with like things that are in your price point. And I encourage people to start small anyways. Like if you want to do a mini retirement, the first one should not be 3 years. Like start with a month, start with 3 months, because there's a little bit of a learning curve and you get better at it over time. One of the tips that I encourage people with saving, look at what is the most high leverage for you. It might be reducing expenses. It might be increasing income. and kind of go with the one that you're going to have the most bang for your buck. I think the thing that can be discouraging about a typical retirement, especially when you're in 20s and your 30s and even your 40s, it's so far away. So if you're like, but I really want to eat Chipotle on Friday at my desk, like that's my one small joy is my burrito bowl. To be like, well, I'm going to give up my burrito bowl so that hopefully when I'm 70, like I can buy a cup of coffee is real tough motivation. But if you said, hey, if I gave up my burrito bowl every Friday, so I gave up 100 burrito bowls over 2 years, that would pay for 3 meals a day in Mexico for a month in 2 years. So I'm just giving up my kind of mediocre Mexican food now, but knowing in 2 months, I'm going to be eating street tacos and drinking margaritas in Cabo. And so the loop of denying yourself something and then enjoying it is much shorter.
Yeah, I like that. I think one thing that we realized when we ended up taking our mini retirement, I guess, I never called it as such, but was that multiple mini retirements, if they're all similar and they're abroad, might be cheaper together than apart. And so what we found was the cost to cross the ocean, right? The cost to make a trip short was so high. Yeah. You would never on a week or 2 week trip to any continent take a 6-day train ride, unless that was part of the trip. And 6 is probably extreme, but I think we took a 2.5, 3-day train ride in Africa. If you were only in Africa for a week, you'd be eating up a huge part of your vacation. And what we found was when you looked at how much cheaper it was per day to travel slow for the cost of 2 international vacations that were each, let's call it 2 weeks, you could do one international vacation that was like 4 months, because the cost to get there and the cost to force yourself to a tighter scope of time and get so many things done go away a little bit when you're spreading it out, or at least you only have to do them one time. And so the only counter I'll give to starting small is that if you have this like 3 different 1 month trip goals, there might actually be a lot more economies of scale to doing 1 3-month trip than 3 1-month trips, if money is the main concern, right? If money is not the main concern and it's about being able to easily get time off work, then completely the opposite. But I do think there are some cases where longer could be cheaper, at least if you're comparing to multiple shorter.
Absolutely. And that's one of the mistakes people make in estimating the cost of a mini retirement, especially if it involves travel, is they go, well, man, our last vacation when we went to South Carolina, gosh, we spent $2,000 for that week. So a month off, that's going to be $8,000. That's the wrong comparison, because traveling slower is so much more affordable per day. And usually when people have more time, they require less luxury. So if you only have 4 days in Paris, like you kind of want to go all in and you really want each element to be very luxurious. But if you're going to live in France for a year, just walking down to like the bakery that everyone knows you and ordering a cappuccino and reading your book in the park and going to the farmer's market and getting a crepe, like that feels amazing when you have enough time.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think kids also create the time luxury element because you're like, well, I just can't do all the things. So today we're going to go to the playground. And I was like, oh, wow. It is way more expensive to travel with kids in that you are buying another 2 plane tickets and getting rooms that can accommodate everyone. But some days we don't do anything. We just go to a park and the kids play around and we go on a walk and they take a nap. So from that perspective, it's actually a little bit less expensive. Spread that over a 3-month trip where you don't even feel the pressure to go do a lot of things every day or every week. I could see how it could be a lot less expensive. And the cost to rent a place for a month is usually much cheaper than 30 times the cost to rent a place for a night.
And for people who have young kids, where essentially any age that you're paying for childcare, this is a very real cost that you might be saving. So I interviewed someone on my podcast that him and his wife had 2 young kids, both under 5. They lived in the Boston area and they moved to France for a year. And it cost them $40,000 to live in France for a year. They both quit their jobs. He said their childcare back home for 2 kids was $40,000 a year. They lived abroad for a year just on the cost of what their childcare would have been. When you're thinking about timing, if you do want kind of an around the world trip or a longer one, like there might be an added perk there.
And I know a lot of people who pay a lot more than $40,000 a year for childcare. So not that you want to do it at the level we did backpacking, but we did 7.5 months for $7,000 a person. Like there's some real affordable ways to live in lots of parts of the world. And there are places that are expensive and not. But I want to talk a little bit about where things can go wrong and how you can make sure it's a success.
I love this. I did it. The whole last section of the book is kind of what to expect on the journey, because some of it's very unexpected. And it's always interesting to me when I talk to people, because before they take a mini retirement, they're worried about the money, they're worried about their employment, they're worried about their healthcare. And then after they've done that, they're like, yeah, okay, none of that was an issue. Here's what actually went wrong. It seems when you're in it, can create kind of a weird mental narrative is that sometimes people don't realize how burned out they are. Burnout's an incredible function that gets us out of a bad situation, and it gives us energy to get out of a bad situation for a long period of time. Like, it's super helpful for survival. Like if you're lost in the forest, like you need to be able to keep going until you get unlost. But as a result of that, sometimes we don't feel the full weight of that fatigue until we're out of that situation. And our body feels like it has access to rest. And this can be tricky if you thought, I'm going to get so much done during this mini retirement, and then you just kind of want to take a nap. It can feel a little bit like recovering from the flu. Not like on the most sick day, but like 3 days later when you're like, I don't know if I want to get out of bed. Like, you're like, I should unload the dishwasher, but that sounds exhausting. You can kind of have a little bit of that vibe. But where it goes wrong is that people create a story in their head. And the story usually sounds like, I'm just a lazy person. Apparently, I'm unmotivated. I can't accomplish anything outside of my job. Maybe I need to have a job just to be productive. It's not accurate and it's not helpful. And a better story is, I'm a lot more tired than I thought I was. Good thing I'm on a mini retirement and can take a nap today, and then just move on with your life. Like, there can be some unnecessary emotional suffering that we invite if we're not exactly sure what to expect.
This episode is brought to you by Delete Me. And if you prefer not to have your identity stolen or have your phone number, home address, or email showing up all over the internet, you really need to check out Delete Me this year. Unfortunately, there's hundreds of data brokers online that are constantly sharing and selling your personal info, and keeping track of all of them is like playing whack-a-mole. But fortunately, if you go to them one by one, you can get them to remove your data. However, that process can take hours and hours to do yourself. I know, I tried it 2 years ago, and after spending more than 10 hours and not even getting close to finishing, I gave up and started using Delete Me, and I haven't looked back. Since then, I've signed up my entire family, because Delete Me will not just find and remove your personal info from hundreds of data broker websites, they'll continuously scan for new data that shows up, which sadly happens all the time, and get that removed as well. On average, they find and remove over 2,000 pieces of personal info for a customer in their first 2 years, and to date, they've done over 100 million data removals for customers. So if you want your personal information removed from the web, go to chrishutchins.com/deleteme and get 20% off a plan for you or your entire family. Again, that's chrishutchins.com/deleteme, or click the link in the description.
What about how to best frame this to people you meet in a way that doesn't come across too crazy, right? Like, oh, well, we're just going to quit our jobs and travel around the world for 3 months. And it sounds like, oh, must be nice. I imagine people get that kind of reaction when they don't find the right way to approach it.
Generally, keep it really simple. In the book, I talk about this idea. You can use the same kind of framework that you did with your employer, but it's like memoir rules. It all has to be true. It cannot be the whole truth. Like, the whole truth is too big. If you try to tell every detail, you're going to lose the plot. So just keep it really simple, really short. One kind of silly trick, but it works really well in American culture, is if you frame it as like, this is something you've earned. We love when people work towards goals and earn the things that they enjoy instead of taking them or being given them. So if you kind of frame it like, yeah, me and my spouse, it's been really busy the last few years, really busy with work, but we've been saving and setting some money aside. And, now we're able to take these 6 months off and kind of enjoy this other thing. And people are like, oh, yeah. Oh, good for you. Like, that's nice. Versus if you're like, man, that last job just sucked. I'm just going to take a vacation. Then people are like, you should have sucked it up.
Yeah, I just realized when you were talking about a spouse, do these mini retirements have to be all or nothing with your partner, or can you take a mini retirement not with your partner at a separate time. Maybe you alternate versus a whole family thing.
Yeah, it's kind of dealer's choice. And there's a lot of benefits to taking turns. One person's at least earning income, and that can feel like a little bit more stability. It can make it a little bit less scary. One person maybe is bringing healthcare for the family, and that can be helpful. So taking turns can have a lot of benefits. One of the downsides, though, that I always encourage couples is that usually both spouses need a mini retirement. One just needs it a little bit more than the other. And so there can be a degree of, let's say the wife really encouraged her husband to take a mini retirement. They're both kind of burned out, but she's like, honey, like you really need this. Like this is going to be so good for you. And then watching him do all the things that she wished she could be doing can create a little bit of resentment, and you need a little bit more communication. Yes, it's primarily for you or for this goal, but how can this benefit our whole family? Negotiating all of those things, speaking out loud, any assumptions you have, especially when one partner's staying at home, the other partner might be like, I mean, I just assumed if you were home, like you would take the kids to doctor's appointments, right? Because now I'm working. Like you thought I was going to take time off work while you're at home to do doctor's appointments. Like, so articulating all of that, because on the other side of it, especially when you have kids, because there's just so much to do. The person who takes time off goes, I just became a stay-at-home spouse. Like I'm a stay-at-home parent now. My whole day is filled. Like all of those other goals and intentions I had for this time off, I'm not really able to accomplish any of them because it's filled with chores and errands and tasks. So it takes a little bit more communication. There again, I have a tool that I encourage people to do like a weekly check-in and set some things that you want to check in. Like, how is this working for you? How is this working for me? How is it working for our kids? How is it working for my parent? Whoever might have expectations on your time, just clearly communicating that upfront and often.
You've mentioned health insurance a few times. How do you think about that? Because I know some people fear that, oh, if I don't have a job,
Yes.
I'm going to lose my health insurance. What other options are there?
There are a lot of options. And I think it's one of those things that creates a lot of fear because people don't really look into the options. So sitting down and saying, what is available to me? You know, if you're going to go back to your job, how can you just stay on their health insurance? If you have a partner who's going to continue working, like obviously that's going to be the plan. For people where either both are separating or maybe one doesn't have health insurance, I think COBRA can be a great option, especially in the like 3 to 12 month range, because it's just simple and it's easy and you have the same doctors and like nothing changes. Or you might eventually choose a different option. I think that so many people don't consider. They try to think of what's the one perfect option that will work for this entire length of time. And it doesn't have to be for the entire length of time. You can do different things at different points. So let's say someone was going to do like a 2-year mini retirement. And at first, they're a married couple, they both take off. And so the first 6 months, they're like, you know what, let's just do COBRA. Like that's really simple. We'll stay on COBRA. And then they have had no income for 6 months. And they're like, okay, let's switch to a plan on the exchange. And maybe because they haven't had income for a long time, like there's some subsidies and it's a little bit more affordable. And they're like, okay, that's cool. And then maybe, you know, a year in, one spouse is like, actually, I think I would want to go back to work part-time. And they find a part-time job that would be interesting and enjoyable for them that also provides health insurance. So then they get health insurance that way. You can choose multiple options and string them together, especially for longer mini retirements.
Yeah, I don't know if this is still the case, but there used to be, because I remember getting laid off and thinking about these things, like some short-term policies in states where it's like, you can't do this forever, but it's reasonably affordable for like a 6 to 12 month window. Or if you're traveling, different travel insurance policies can be a decent option as well.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm ready to really start putting this plan for us to do this next summer, especially because it's like, well, the kids are out of school. What can we do with them? How can we plan ahead? Any other parting advice for me as I think about planning this with kind of almost a year lead time?
So one, when you have a long lead time, I'll speak to that element, is starting to put in place what those goals would be, what those intentions would be, not just for planning, but to start to kind of practice, to kind of warm up and get into that mode. And one thing I encourage people to do is to kind of find the micro habit that matches that intention. So if you said, like, for you guys with kids, you're like, we're going to do a big trip, we're going to travel, start practicing travel with your kids. And what that can look like is just on a Saturday being like, you know what, we're going to leave the house at 9 a.m. and we're not going to come home till 7 p.m. And we're just going to be out and about. We're going to go out to breakfast. We're going to go to a park. We're going to go to a farmer's market, maybe a museum. We're going to go out to dinner. But start to practice those things so that when you get to the mini retirement, you're not starting every learning curve. It can kind of help you just be more successful right from the get-go.
Okay, I'm sure there are lots of people who, like me, are now excited to do this. For people who want to dig in a lot more, where do you want to send them?
The book is available everywhere. But if you go to retireoften.com, you can find the book or worksheets. I have a really unhinged newsletter and a Retire Often podcast where I share people's stories. If you kind of like the idea, but you're like, yeah, it won't work for me, I would encourage you to read through the book because I think it would resolve a lot of the fears and the challenges. But mostly, if you get the idea in your head and you kind of start walking in that direction, life might provide an opportunity when you don't expect it, and you can pivot and take advantage of that.
I love that. Before we started recording, I said, what would be a goal here? You said, I want someone to message me after they take this trip and tell me about it. And so for anyone listening who's inspired, I will be disappointed if I check in with Jillian in a year and you haven't gotten at least one message of someone who's taken a mini retirement. So do that, reach out and let her know. This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.